You're listening to Send This to Your CEO, the B2B Tech Marketing Podcast, presented by 4B Marketing. Explore the world of B2B tech marketing with industry insiders and experts. Our episodes are packed with the latest insights, strategies, and trends to help you stay ahead in this ever-evolving industry. Whether you want to sharpen your marketing skills or keep up with tech developments, we have everything you need right here.
My name is Sam Grice, Director of Strategy with 4B Marketing, and we've got an exciting discussion for you today. Really what we're talking about is MDF in the tech channel, and forget what you know today because it is constantly evolving and it has changed so much over the past 5 years, let alone 1 year. And so with me today, I've got a couple of panelists joining me from our marketing team at 4B. But before we do that, I want to introduce 4B Marketing. And so we are a tech channel marketing organization. And the reason why we are a tech channel marketing organization is because that's where we were born. That's where all of us have had our careers. So our founder had a 20+ year career in the tech channel. I personally had an 8+ year career of selling in the tech channel from value-added resellers, systems integrators, and even in the emerging tech market. Really what we do is we focus on business outcomes. We want to go drive revenue. And so this topic of MDF needs to be a revenue driver. We need marketing budget to go help facilitate sales, go close deals. And so when we create a strategy, we're talking about multiple different budget that we're using to go drive that. We're really focused on kind of 5 business drivers: driving revenue, reducing cost, reducing risk, cash flow optimization, which is a big budget piece of it, and asset utilization. And so this conversation today is really going to go in depth on what MDF is, how MDF is playing in the market, what we need to change about utilizing MDF to go drive revenue. And so really excited about the panelists that we have today because they've been living in this world with the budget of MDF and really helping go drive revenue. And so I've got Tyler Jacobson, our Director of Marketing. Tyler, you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, hi there, Tyler Jacobson, Director of Marketing here at 4B. I've actually been working in the tech sales channel when I started working with 4B. Boy, what is that now? 8 years? Pretty close to it. And so I've had a lot of experience, especially with MDF and MDF programs. So I'm excited to present some of the things we found and help all of us forge a path forward to success here.
Awesome. Excited to have you on the discussion today. And also joining us is our Director of Content, Aaron Rosenbluth.
That's right. I'm Aaron Rosenbluth, Director of Content. So I was the first employee of the agency, but and we'll call that officially about 8.5 years ago. But about 2 years before that, I started working with Greg, our founder, ghostwriting content for him and managing social media feeds for partners in the channel. And so I've had a firsthand seat to witness sort of the changes and seeing how things have ebbed and flowed and where it's been gone and the pitfalls of both sides of it. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, and I'm excited to run through it with you guys today.
Awesome. And before we dive into all of the content that we have today, we do have the chat open. So if you have questions as we're going through this, let's keep it an open dialogue, right? That's the whole point of this today, is to help with what we've learned and help those out there learn more about MDF and how to utilize it effectively. So feel free to drop questions in the chat or notes in the chat or thoughts that you may have. I will be monitoring that during the discussion. As well, make sure you stay until the end. We do have an offer for you guys at the end to help you guys understand this process and maximize your efficiency with it. So with that, let's go on ahead and dive in, right? And starting from the beginning, it comes down to expectations, right? How we're realigning those expectations. And to give you a little bit of insight into the MDF market, right? It's changed a lot, as I've mentioned, right? The days of getting 40 grand, 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand in a quarter to go drive marketing efforts are gone. It doesn't happen anymore, right? OEMs are tightening their purse strings, and multiple reasons for that, right? COVID was a big impact of that. Also, return of value on that MDF fund through the partner channel was a big piece of it as well, which comes back to the expectation side of the house of really what the OEMs are trying to accomplish out of it and what the partners are trying to accomplish out of MDF, right? It really is a budget to be able to go drive revenue, right? Go get opportunities and so on. But how has that changed, right? With the limited budget, what are the requirements? What do we need to come back to really show that we're driving that revenue? And I would really love to get your feedback, Tyler and Aaron, of how you've seen it changed over the years. So I'd open it up to both of you from a perspective of the 8 years that both of you have of marketing with MDF funds. What have you seen change over the past couple of years? And what do you think some of those expectations should be moving forward?
I can start there.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I just want real quickly. I want to say the biggest big shiny object change that I've seen was the not related to content or anything in that sense, but watching some of these monumental parties and events that people used to throw with massive open bar budgets and all of these things. These big shiny objects that I think people got used to being able to organize and throw that would hit a ton of people at one time and give them, a good time, but didn't always result in a ton of opportunity. It seemed like a kind of a giant waste in some sense. So I think what I've witnessed is seeing a steep decline in events like that, and kind of refocusing and people scrambling to figure out like, well, wait, that's the old way of doing things. What do we do now?
But I
So,
wouldn't necessarily say that that is a uniformly wrong way to go about it. I mean, events continue to be in-person experiences, continue to be a great lead generator for this industry. One thing we don't find is, we don't find a whole lot of leads coming in through SEO for this, right? So there are certain channels that don't work in this space, and there's certain channels that do. I think events definitely can be a good place to start building that relationship. So to your point, yes, it was there. Maybe here. I actually let me just take a step back here. I from the moment that I was introduced to the MDF programs, I saw an inherent flaw, which is that these are quarterly programs meant to generate results within a quarter, and that's not how the buying cycle goes for these for the people that you're selling to. Right. And so it can take a really long time to get leads and then get sales. You might see those materialize a year and a half later. So I think that just inherently that's probably flawed. And how we judge the effectiveness of an MDF program, like I said, might be flawed right out of the gate. So I think it's we need to think about the staged cycles of that. And I know that we're going to get into some of this of like, okay, what can we realistically expect if we're introducing ourselves to a net new audience today?
that's a great point. Yeah, the way that it's been done, it virtually ignores the reality of the buying process and the buyer's journey. It doesn't reward thinking about things in the long term. We wrote a piece about it called referring to it as quarter mania.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
Yeah, that's a great point of expectations and really what's expected with that investment going into it, right? And I think it goes into kind of where they're trying to insert themselves into the buyer cycle, if you will. And we'll get into that from a marketing funnel perspective and the importance of touching every piece of the marketing funnel. But I also think that some of it, when you're taking MDF to a big, wide range of partners, it does start to lead to what we would consider kind of lazy efforts, if you will. How do we get the value proposition from a partner perspective out there quickly and so on without being generic and the same? And so I wanted to share something that we pulled up off of LinkedIn as well from a marketing perspective. And of course, we blurred people out and so on, what that is. But it's funny when you go onto LinkedIn, and if anybody's done this, you take the quotation marks and you insert the piece. It was a lot of fun with ChatGPT when it first came out. If you did regenerate response, because people were just copying and putting it right on LinkedIn, so you could tell right away that it was coming from ChatGPT. But what's happening is, it's allowing some partners to not be aggressive in their marketing, not get their value proposition out there, and really just stick with the status quo. Right. And right now in the market, we are not in a status quo. Buying cycles have changed. More signatures are needed. Deeper value is needed to go close deals. Right. Speaking throughout the industry with a lot of my buddies that are sales reps at different companies, whether it's partners or OEMs, there's challenges out there to go close deals right now. And these big deals, they're being delayed. And of course, a big deal can make your year. It can make a company's year, right? So how is MDF going to come in and make that change? But want to stop here. Any comments from Aaron on this?
I would love to speak to this. This is a game I like to play, and yeah, good point with the regenerate response. If you're bored and you want to entertain yourself, that's a good way to do it. But with this, we blur people out because these are lovely humans, many of them that we've seen who post this content, and we don't want to put anyone on blast. But what the point I want to make is that they're all grabbing literally the same content, the same caption, same links, the same hashtags from a partner portal And then publishing the content. And I think most of the people who are doing this publishing don't realize that virtually everyone else is gathering identical content and doing the same thing. So this is all I could grab in a screenshot. But if you saw the whole journey, I mean, it was 2, 3, 4 pages on LinkedIn of people publishing the identical caption. I've always viewed this as just being odd. I mean, going back to kind of the earliest days of this, I came in as a novice, not from tech, but from a different area of marketing and branding. But we're talking about 10 years ago, and kind of coming from that mindset of everything wanting everything to be unique, campaign driven, and oriented around the differentiator of the partner or the client or the brand. This blew my mind. Like, really, all of these people are, in my opinion, just lazily publishing the exact same content and expecting results from it. So yeah, Tyler.
I kind of want to address that idea of lazy, because I've heard that word a couple times now.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing here, and what I would assume that you're seeing in these three personas, you're not looking at marketers. You're looking at people who are getting instruction from an OEM who has the war chest to be able to afford the world's best marketers, right? Why wouldn't you trust this? And so I think that, the OEM is saying, so I think the OEM's intentions are great. And I think that they're trying to do their best to offer support here. So I think there's a lot of good faith here, but I think that there's a breakdown when it actually comes to execution, because you do end up with a situation like this. You're not getting into unique value. You're not getting into target audiences. You don't even have to be considerate of the recipient of the message and what their needs are, because theoretically the work's already been done for you and you've been given a budget. Now, what I would point out here is that these three people, it looks like they're getting about the same results. A couple people giving likes, no comments. It's probably not translating to leads. It's probably not translating to sales. But then when that MDF report comes and you have to start filling in, well, what did I get for the money that was given to me by the OEM? It can't feel good for these guys. It can't feel good for the OEM, right? So there's a little something that needs to change in there.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Great point, right? Is that the OEMs do have the best interest in heart, right? And they are doing the right thing from a perspective of trying to enable the partner community. It's how does the partner community take what they're being given and maximize that for their value proposition to the marketplace and the audience that they're talking to. And I think that that's actually a good segue into kind of our next topic, right? And especially from the integration of sales and marketing and where we need to be playing in this, right? A lot of times from an MDF perspective, the expectation is opportunities. And we talk about it, and there's a new terminology kind of going around like MIP, marketing influence pipeline, right? And that's what kind of they want from an MDF perspective is with the quarter mania of we need opportunities right now, right? As opposed to just leads to start to develop that and what that looks like. And also from a seller's perspective in the past, right? If I got a lead from, a webinar or something like that, that's information gathering time. That's not necessarily a opportunity right off the bat, but would love to hear from you, Tyler, because you're starting to get into that a little bit of, the audience and what we're trying to accomplish out of that. So I'd love to get a little bit of your perspective on this.
Yeah. I mean, I listened to something recently where they said the only thing that matters is the journey that has money at the end. Right. And
wow.
I think if we take that perspective, like, listen, I know the reputation of marketers in this industry, and I understand why it exists. I think the expectation from VARs, right, is I want a stack of leads and I want those leads to turn into business. And that has been a recipe for disappointment for the modern era, right? Because that's not going to happen. If you do get a stack of leads, they're not going to convert. They're not going to be strong leads, because the buying journey that's natural in this industry doesn't lend itself to that. So yeah, what marketing does in this space is we are the cheerleaders for sales. Mm-hmm. We are the ones who help sales begin having those opportunities to create the relationships, to make sure that there are touch points within that relationship. But ultimately sales has got to carry that ball, right? Nobody's just going to be marketed their way into $1 million contracts.
This system has set up this tension between sales and marketing. I mean, it doesn't exist only in this industry or in the channel, but things like this are what creates that tension between sales and marketing, where sales is thinking that marketing is just here to, the creative prima donnas who just want things to look and sound beautiful. Which there's an element to that, but people respond to that. That's the thing. And then the idea of marketers saying, well, what are sales doing with all these leads that we're getting them? Like, the system is just bound to create tension between the two sides and silo them. And it's unnecessary. It all works together. It's same team, same goal. It's just, we haven't really looked at it from that perspective. And there's something that kind of going back related to this, but going back for me, like the word leads has always rubbed me wrong. Opportunities is great. Leads, I think when you're just looking at people as leads, we want more leads. You're not, the humanity is stripped from that word. And I think when you're thinking about it that way, you stop looking at the whole person and that person that you're marketing to that has goals, challenges, desires, and problems that you can solve for them in their work life, whatever it is. So when you start looking at people as simple numbers and leads, like a word like that, I think that you stop seeing this person that you're trying to sell and market to. And that's an important distinction. So
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
love that. I love
I
that. The persona side. You want to go, Tyler?
well, I was going to say, I think that's why you can't just throw out marketing altogether and just put all of the effort into sales, because you do have to understand, your persona. You do need to understand their needs. You need to understand how you uniquely are a better choice for those people very specifically than any competitor. That's why just going out there and publishing something that an OEM gave you that everybody else in your industry is posting, that's not going to help you. It's not going to move the conversation forward.
yeah, there's no direct connection there. You're not going to nurture the relationship that way.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And I'll give you an example of, my past life as a seller in this space. That really from a leads perspective, with the way MDF is right now, sellers are putting in everybody that comes to the event, right? So that we can hit that metric of how many leads are coming in. But is that the correct persona that I need to be talking to from a sales perspective to go close the deal, right? There's a bunch of sales methodology out there like Medic and SciPab and so on, right? There's a whole bunch of them that you can follow. But is that really the decision maker that I need to be having a conversation with to get the ball rolling? Or is that really the right person that I need to be talking to? And a good example of that is in my past life, as I mentioned, I was in the contact center and I was having leads come through in the data center. Now, because I've had a career all over the space, I knew how to shift the conversation for cloud utilization and retirement of cloud utilization and those aspects to be able to get the conversation going. But that wasn't the right person that I was supposed to be talking to. But because of the way the system was set up, it qualified as a lead. So then I've got leadership from a sales perspective saying, hey, marketing's throwing you all these leads. Why aren't you having conversations with them? And it's like, well, is that the best use of my time from a sales perspective to follow up with them? Or is there a better way for us to nurture this together to understand that account is interested in something that we're doing, finding additional people and utilizing marketing and sales together to go nurture that relationship within that account so that my time's being spent properly, marketing's time's being spent properly, and we're working together to go get to that opportunity for where I can engage and really drive revenue. So love that kind of insight there. From a perspective of where sales comes into the mix, right, and helps out with this from an MDF perspective, I would love to kind of get your feedback, Tyler and Aaron, of where do you think the most effective kind of insert point is there? I gave my perspective from a sales side of the house, but, from a marketing side of the house with MDF and utilizing that budget, where do you think the most effective time for them to come in and support would be?
It's a really great question. I think that I think that if you've put together a really smart marketing or a smart, sales and marketing mix, marketing, use it all over the place, right? If you can bring that all in, ideally marketing is setting up the opportunity for you to start forging those relationships. You might not be selling at that point. You're going to be creating those relationships and understanding the client's needs. So I think as long as marketing has helped identify again, who are you going after? Where do you play the best? Where's the niche that you can really thrive in? And then helping create those opportunities with that audience. Then, again, I think it should run parallel. It feels like the sales Like there is, the sales insertion point is as early as possible because that
Totally.
relationship is going to need to be developed. It's not just going to be transactional. It's who do I know? Who do I trust when I have that need?
I was going to say, yeah, precisely. Same page. I think it's eternal. That's the word that comes to my mind. The marketing,
Like
they're,
that.
they're in lockstep all the time, and it's a constant cycle of building and generating awareness and loyalty. I mean, it's always got to be running all the time, constant.
Love it. And the reason why I ask that is because, take it the seller's perspective. A lot of times sellers go, oh, that's marketing's job. Or they go, oh, that's sales job. And really, it's a joint effort. There needs to be a combination of both parties working together to move this sales cycle forward, right? And move this pipeline forward. And an aspect of it from an MDF and a marketing budget perspective is, we've talked about where MDF is kind of inserting themselves because of the short quarter time frame that they're measuring things by. But there's some of the funnel that needs to be touched from a partner perspective to help drive to that. And so diving into it, I'd love to talk about the marketing funnel really and what this looks like, because to me, from an outsider's perspective as a seller, I always think of, opportunity, that's consideration, right? And when I think as a lead, I think it's consideration, right? But really,
Right.
there's some pieces to the funnel that need to be hit. And I think that MDF's expectation is use it for the consideration phase so that we can get opportunities and move these deals down the line. But then the partner is missing the opportunity for the awareness and get people interested and understand what's happening with their business and so on. So would love for you to touch on this as well.
But
Yeah,
people
and I
have
think.
to know. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Aaron.
Say the awareness. I mean, people have to know who you are and what you do, what you're about, and trust you for them to consider you and convert. So it's such an essential part of the equation that gets missed. You can't skip that process. Yeah, Tyler.
And I'm the guy who says that any client worth having probably already has 5 salespeople in his ear in your vertical today, right? They probably are already on the road to forging that relationship. So while it makes a seller's job considerably easier to only be there in the consideration stage, you got to develop those relationships and carry those relationships so that they aren't considering outside parties when that time comes, because that window for consideration is going to be very brief in the entirety of that relationship, right? And so you got to build up to it. So I think that there's that idea when we're talking about realigning expectations, I think that that's part of it, right? Is that you're not just going to capture people in consideration, and if that's where you're expecting things to happen, your deal is already lost, because somebody has already spent the time and awareness and fostering that relationship and making sure they're known, trusted, and that the prospect has really good feelings about the product that they're potentially getting ready to buy. Right. And so this is, again, while I think that there's good faith from everybody involved, but I think that this is where the MDF program has traditionally been a bit more misguided, and where I think that the marketing influence pipeline is a much better way to look at it, because we really do have to look at how long do we have to be in this person's awareness, and how long do we have to be building that trust before that brief window of consideration opens up.
I agree with that. And that makes me think about the creative aspects of marketing and what MDF has done to that, where you see and I forgive me for using the word lazy again, it's just what comes to mind, but you see sort of this catch-all approach to just generating content and putting more things out there, even if it's the same thing that anybody any of my competitors can get. Is the way to do this, rather than having my own skin in the game and relying on my own money and resources with MDF, which is what has seen people have to do now, and really digging into, well, if I'm a managed service provider and I know that I'm offering basically the same thing as everybody else who does this and the same technologies, then if I'm taking this sort of standard old school approach to MDF and the way that OEMs are delivering prefabricated content to me, then I'm not going to be able to stand out and have that true differentiator that has somebody go, wow, I really want to work with these guys over these guys because they just get me. It goes back to being the human versus the lead versus a number. You're looking at it also in that sense, then you really get who you're talking to. Your messaging is so targeted, your words, your brand tone of voice. Everything is so dialed into that specific person that they can't help but choose you.
And where you're focusing your energy. From my perspective, that's one of the big takeaways here, and where MDF should be more supplemental to that is I already understand where my audience is that I need to go after, right? And now I've got some marketing dollars because that OEM knows that I have already got my sights set on their next sale as well. My next sale is their next sale. So that's where I think that MDF should be supplemental to that. But that's the thing, it should be supplemental to work that's already being done.
Yeah, this isn't, you don't throw all your eggs in that basket, you can't. And we've seen it go. It becomes, I keep using the word lazy. I can't get away from it. That's the only way I can look at it. It trains, and it's not intentional on the partner side. It just trains them to operate in this like very, standard, bland way of doing things.
Well, and I
Right,
think
it's
that there's
always yielded poor results. That's the thing, is it
Yes.
always yields disappointment. So anybody who's existing in that space, they're wondering why it's not working for them. And I don't blame them. They're not marketers. Again,
Yeah.
they're being instructed to do something that unfortunately isn't yielding, like nobody's satisfied in that. So again, that's Sam, your first question, how has MDF changed? That's one of the ways it's changing, is it's like, okay, wait, this is continually unsatisfying, then how are we going to make it satisfactory?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there's a couple things to think about it as well from a dollar perspective, right? When we had 50, 60, $70,000 a quarter, we didn't necessarily need our own marketing budget to go drive things, right? Because we were getting that dollar value from vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, right? And those numbers have dwindled down to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, right? Some 20,000, depending on, your business and so on. And the traditional way was we're leading with technology. We're leading with that product, right? From a reseller perspective, and resellers have popped up all over, right? There's thousands and thousands of resellers saying very similar things, right? And utilizing that dollar to go push the exact same thing. And it comes back to, what are you doing that's differentiating? And also now that budget shrunk, we can't just not invest. We still have to invest in this to be able to get to the channel, right? And get into the market and the audience that we need to see. And the challenge is, since that dollar value shrunk so much, right? How are we going to go do it, right? We aren't seeing the marketing influence pipeline because we're only investing $10,000 for vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, as opposed to 60, 60, 60, right? So there's a big gap there as well as part of the ROI and investment that you need to make. But I think it also comes back to, I'm going to skip ahead 2 slides because we touched on awareness, we've touched on consideration, but really the UVP side of the house, right? What is your differentiator, right? From a partner perspective, you need to be able to communicate that. And with MDF, you can communicate that with the technology that you have because we're partnered right there. We're trying to drive the value for that OEM and that technology, but also you need to have your differentiator as well. And I think a challenge that we see in the space is, we've got the best engineers. We've got the best customer service, right? Is that really a differentiator? I mean, it's something that I've worked for 3 or 4, different resellers selling in the space, and almost all of us have very similar taglines from that perspective of we've got the best engineers, we've got the best customer service. And so I'd love to open this up from a content perspective of how do you communicate your unique value proposition, but also, Tyler, the multi-channel facet strategy of really what is your unique value proposition and how do you go communicate that?
Yeah, and I think that that's really more important. That's the first thing, is figure out what your UVP is. And to Sam's point, it is not your best engineers. It's not your best customer service. And the reason that's not your unique value proposition is because it's not unique. Everybody's saying that. And you might have them. And I believe you when you say you have the best engineers, right? Your end buyer is hearing that from everybody. So defining your UVP is really important, and it's got to be important to your audience. It can't just be important to you guys on your side. It needs to be important to the audience. One of the ways that you can say that you can define a UVP is who you go after. Who are your prospects? Is it, businesses of a certain size in a very certain industry and that you have a long track record in, that you can then niche down and you can say, when it comes to MSP for, I don't know, for small practice, for small medical practices, we're the ones. We have a track record there. We're known. We're at all the conferences. You see us in your trade magazines. You see us in our newsletters. And so I think that that's where I think that that's the first and probably most important thing. That's going to keep you from reposting the same marketing collateral that every single other person who doesn't have a UVP is posting.
You're right. You're right. Where I was thinking same page. I'm thinking it, from a content perspective, what this looks like is taking your UVP, defining something that's genuine beyond our deep engineering bench, etc., and then understanding how that fits into your key persona's life. Their needs, and then speaking their language to them, conveying what your UVP means for them. At the end of the day, it's not about you, it's about them. It's about what you do is going to solve their problem. And so, I see this a lot on web copy. You guys hear me say it often. You see a lot of us, we, and not a lot of you on when we're looking at websites and rewriting copy, and we're writing copy fresh. So I always want to take the perspective of taking the UVP, getting really dialed into what your actual genuine value and differentiator is, and then understanding what that means for your customer, and more importantly, their customer, and then fitting the content, the messaging, the stories you tell, everything around that, from their lens, so they can see themselves in it. Yeah,
Definitely. And I think that the UVP side from an OEM perspective is going to be different than the UVP side from a partner perspective. And a lot of times through the channel, the UVP from a partner perspective is what's going to win a deal, right? And win an opportunity. From an OEM perspective, it's going to be sold, right? They're going to get the deal, right? And so on. And they've got their competitors that they've got differentiators against, and so on. But from a partner community that's reselling technology A, and the partner that's selling technology A, and another partner that's selling technology A, how do you go win that deal? And so just thinking about that from a perspective of, the ICP or TCP, right? Target customer profile, ideal customer profile. There's a couple different acronyms that we can say for the same thing, but it comes down to really honing in on what your differentiator is. And really, Tyler, you always say it, so I'm going to say it. The riches are in the niches, right? The riches are in the niches. What is that vertical market that you're going after? What is the differentiator within that vertical market that you're going after, right? What do you specialize in? And I think an aspect that's also maybe missed so far is you're known, liked, and trusted. That's a big aspect of it. But Tyler, I see your hand up. I'd love you.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to inject in this is Cisco is a safe solution, right? So if Cisco is the OEM, that might be their differentiator, that some reliability, some technological leaps forward, and it's important. Now, when it comes down to the partner level, you also have to be a safer choice than the other guy who's trying to sell you that exact same Cisco unit, right? And so that's where it's really crucially important there. You have to be a safe choice for whatever the needs are, because people at the end buyer here, they're caring about a couple things. They're caring about, am I going to get fired, or am I going to get bonused and promoted, right? And that's really what you have to manage to. And that's why what you said, people they know, like, and trust. Yeah, that trust and makes you a safer choice. That's why you have that long tail nurture going on there. So so I think that it really needs to be thought of like that, not just that we sell safe hardware, but why are you from?
Perfect. Okay. A little bit of technical difficulties there, Tyler. You were cutting out a little bit just at the end, but that's okay. We did get a question in the chat. I see the question. I'm going to hold that for the final thoughts when we start to answer a whole bunch of questions, but just wanted to let you know that I do see that. And so we've talked kind of about the highlights of MDF and its role that it's playing in the marketplace and where things are sitting today. It was a lot of kind of background, if you will, and starting to get into differentiators and how you go do this thing. But a big aspect of it is money, right? Money is a big aspect of it, right? How do you get the budget? How do you get a better budget, right? And one of the aspects that is important to me is, and I keep on touching about it, is this slush fund of money has shrunk a ton, right? It doesn't mean that the OEMs aren't investing into the partner community. They absolutely are. they're expecting results and they want to go drive business. And so they're very focused on that. But what does that look like from a partner community, and how has that started to limit what partners are able to do? And so I'd love to open that up again to Tyler and Aaron from your perspective of what you've seen over the past 8 years with working with tech channel players of, the marketing budget that we had, and then it's shifted and now they may be investing. Would love to just get your feedback on that.
I'll
And I
start
think,
looking back. Sorry, Tyler. Okay.
yeah,
Cool. You can front. I was just gonna say, from my perspective, what it's done, the way the things have worked, and we can get into like the kind of, I think, the opportunity and how it's in what's changed. But the way it was before, people just got used to this kind of as we've hit kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but this standard approach to doing things that I feel like genuinely limited the creativity in the output. And creativity is a word that might sound fluffy. It's kind of a soft word, but ultimately that is what marketing is fueled by, creativity, and the way that you are able to create these campaigns and assets and ideas out in the marketplace that really resonate with people on beyond just a superficial level is by having in the money, the desire, and the structure to be able to foster that space for the kind of creativity and storytelling that'll do it. I mean, I've always looked at the Cisco's own marketing and how it differs from what they gave to partners. Like their marketing tends to be amazing, but it looks really different from what they offer to the partners. But I think that's because it was always that, like, supplemental is the point. It was never really intended to be the entire thing that you do. That's just how people got used to doing it. So, and I think the structure of it and the budgets, it facilitated that approach, and it kind of was rigid in terms of how you proof of performance and the things that you had to do. So it didn't always allow for that kind of extensive creativity that really tells a different story and that differentiates you from your competition. So I think now it's evolving to a place where people have to put a little bit more of their money into this. But there's an opportunity there. You're going to be when it's your dollar versus a dollar coming from an OEM. You're more careful with it, but you also want to invest more in the creativity and the storytelling. I think ultimately we'll see better marketing.
Love that. And Tyler, before you jump in, one piece that I wanted to call out there was just the supplemental side. That's really what it is supplemental to your partner marketing, to what you do, right? And what you do differently, right? And it's supplemental. It shouldn't be the whole budget that you have to go drive your differentiator in the market and go drive your business, because what they're doing from an OEM perspective is they're selling the technology and they've got some services that they're selling as well. But at the partner side, a lot of times it's not just the hardware resale, right? It's the professional services, it's the managed services, it's the architecture and design of the environment that they're providing as well. And so that's being missed when all we're using is the funds coming in from MDF, if you will. But Tyler, I saw your head nodding if you had anything to add there.
Yeah, I've been working on a Tylerism in my brain the last couple of days. I'll try it out here, which is that I don't think that there's any business owner ever who said, "Man, I wish I had a smaller marketing budget." Right? Nope. So why are we treating it that way? Why are we treating it like we do only want to exist on this small amount of money that is being given to us, even when it was a big amount of money? That's all we want to put into the pot, especially when your competitors, and this is how I view it. So you can say, yeah, the budgets used to be bigger, now they're smaller. It doesn't matter. If your competition is willing to put more skin in the game and more in the pot and have more resources than you are, then you are inherently at a disadvantage. And that's not how you want to run a business. You want to run your business in an advantageous way. So if all of your competitors are existing just on the MDF, then that's going to limit what they can do, and it's going to limit how far they can go. So if you put anything more in there, you're going to be able to go further. Now, you want to be able to spend that money intelligently. You want to be able to have it be an investment, not an expense at the end of the day. But that's why, that's why I'm saying you need a better marketing budget, because you are going up against competition who has to make these exact same decisions that you do. Some of them are going to be saying, yeah, I don't want to put more in. Some of them are going to be saying, yeah, I want to put a lot more in, and I want to dominate this vertical. I want to dominate this space. And that's who you're really up against in order to thrive.
Love it. Love it. And we did have another question come into the chat, and it really leads into this question right here is really, how do you go justify the budget, right? That challenge of, hey, we had this slush fund that was our full marketing budget. Now that's coming down. For somebody that's a marketing leader or a sales leader that's saying, hey, we need to go to leadership and we need to get more budget to go drive this, would love to hear your process of how do we get more budget to go do this, right? I know that from the question in the chat to kind of lead into this is, typical marketing budget from a partner reseller space, right? Can you calculate it based off of percentage of revenue or net income? What does that look like? All of that goes into how you go justify budget, because at the end of the day, we're in a capitalistic society. It's about driving revenue, reducing cost, reducing risk, asset utilization, and cash flow optimization. And cash flow is king, especially in this business, right? It is king to be able to be a successful business. But would love to get your perspective, Tyler, from Director of Marketing of, how would you go justify this budget and what should that percentage be in this partner reseller market?
Yeah. So how you're going to justify the budget has to start with a plan, right? You can't just go ask for more money and then not know how you're going to spend it. And so I think that all of these things that we've been talking about cascade back down to that plan. Who is our target audience? How well is it defined? Can that target audience help us, and not just help us, can our financial goals be met with that audience? Is there going to be enough buying happening within our timeline for that to happen? Once you've defined that, you've defined your unique value proposition, you're going to have to dominate that space, right? You don't want to come in third, fourth, or fifth. I just saw, this was a completely different market, but I just saw that, in a very specific category that had hundreds of competitors, the top 10 competitors accounted for over 50% of that market. So being at the top is very valuable space, and you want that. That also keeps competitors out. Just as we were talking about, Cisco's a safe option, right? So I might not even consider anybody other than Cisco because I know that that's what I want, because I know that it's going to be reliable and it's going to meet the needs of my company. By the way, I'm not here to do a commercial for Cisco, just using them as an example. So I think once you've defined that, now you do have to come back and say, okay, this is how we justify the amount of money that I'm asking for. We actually have some calculators that we use to get to that, but you can say, okay, listen, we want to do it as a percentage of revenue. So, before any other expenses, maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 5%. There are studies out there, I think from Gartner, that say that, typically a agnostic of industry, companies spend between 9 and 11% of their revenue back to marketing. I have not seen that in the tech channel. Usually, if there's anything, because the whole reason we're having this is because some people just rely on strictly MDF, which means that you're using no percentage of that budget for marketing, right? So you can do it based on margin. You could do it, this isn't, after all of our expenses are paid, how much money do we have left over? Okay, can we take 5% of that and turn that into marketing budget? And is that going to be enough for us to get on the road with this plan? So there's several different ways to slice and dice those numbers. But I guess what I would suggest is slice and dice those numbers. Have it based on something in reality. And so when I say that, I mean, we work with a company that's a couple billion, and they just kind of gut check their marketing budgets. They gut check that allocation, and it's hard for them to say that it's based on anything, which means that it's hard to grow those resources when you need it, because it's like, no, we just put $1 million a year into this. Well, but what if you need 2 million? What if your competitors are doing that? What if the market is growing and you actually need resources to go take advantage of some situations? So I think it should be based on something.
That's a great point. Great point. And I think that it comes down to a couple of things, right? We can't reinvest revenue, right? We have to reinvest margin, right? And gross profit, right? Because those are the dollars that we have access to. And I think a big piece of it is setting baselines and getting an understanding of your existing clientele today, right? What was the customer per acquisition cost? Do you have any insight into that? Can you at least start to put some numbers around that? On top of that, what's the lifetime value of that customer, right? Do they stay for 1 year? Is it one purchase? Is it a 5-year contract? Do we have them on average for 7 years? What does that look like? And a big piece of that comes back to, the different sides of the business, right? And your business specifically. If you're hardware resale, right, that market is anywhere from 3 to 5% margin typically. Sometimes it gets up to 11, 12%. That's kind of industry leading, if you will. If you're, doing software specifically, it's a higher margin percentage, right? 15 to 20% to be able to reinvest in long-term contracts. All of those pieces need to come into play to be able to justify that to leadership. And I think a big piece of it is when you're taking it to leadership, you need to remember that they're thinking about it in the capitalistic way, right? What do I need to do to go drive revenue and what's the ROI going to be? And ROI is always a tough one from a marketing perspective with awareness campaigns and so on. But that data of customer lifetime value, that helps you back into that, right? And so having those data points before you go to leadership to say, hey, I want to go run this campaign, we need to go customer lifetime value. If we land one customer, is $1 million, right? And our margin on that's 10%. So it's $100,000 that we can reinvest back into the business, right? We expect, to have 10 potential buyers here. They're in the consideration phase, right? We believe that we can get one of those customers to come back. The investment of $50,000 for that event looks a lot better than it does if you just go, hey, I want to go do an event. So hopefully that answered your question. I know it's not a set in stone number, and part of it, like Tyler said, was because of the MDF interaction today, right? Of relying on MDF for the full budget. But Tyler, I saw your hand come up there.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm so glad that you talked about cost per acquisition and lifetime value. Those are such important metrics, and they can really be neglected, especially if you don't even know they exist, right? But cost per acquisition, if you think about this is our marketing budget and this is how many customers we got out of it, and then this is what their lifetime value is going to be, you might see that, your cost per acquisition, that what you're putting in there is an extremely low number. And that might be fine, but again, you are going up against competitors. And if the competitors have done that math and they've said, you know what, instead of putting in 1% of that LTV, I'm going to put in, 5%. Well, they've done that math, they've made a calculated risk, and they're going to, 5x your marketing efforts. That's going to come out, that's going to come back to them. That investment is going to pay off. So that's really why I think it's, I really want to emphasize, figure out what that cost per acquisition is and what you're getting in return for it.
Love it.
So
Love
important.
it.
Yeah. I'm really glad you put that in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to jump to the final slide here. And really, this is final thoughts, final notes. And before we dive into kind of our final thoughts, we did have a question in the chat that I want to propose to both of you. The question is, what are your thoughts about lead campaigns, appointment setters? Is this a sustainable option? So I'd love to open that up to both of you. I've got my opinion on it because I think it comes back to the funnel and where we're positioning that aspect of it. But would love to hear your perspective, Tyler and Aaron, from what you've seen, because I know that we've utilized some of that in the past, using some MDF funds to go do that as well, but would love to get your perspective.
Yeah, if I can take this one. So my opinion on it is that it's not really effective. I don't think it follows the normal trajectory of how sales are made in this industry. And I know a lot of marketing agencies offer it. And the reason they offer it is because it's in demand. But again, that goes back to that expectation, like hand me a list of leads that will ultimately turn into customers. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, if it does, it's going to be an extremely small hit rate. That said, if you have done this and you've seen success in it, keep investing in it and don't stop, right? Don't let my opinion of that affect it. If it's actually proving to be valuable to your business, keep doing it. I think it's unnatural for the buying journey. That's why I'm like, I think it just kind of goes back to that whole thing of like, give me a stack of leads that I can just then go start closing deals, which, yeah, I don't see that happening. But if it's working for you, keep it going.
Yeah,
Aaron, what do you?
Yeah, I totally agree. It just feels like we haven't really seen it work well at all. Feels like a very or throw spaghetti at the wall, I should say, approach to doing things. I also have flashbacks to working in some of that in that arena years ago when we first started this thing, where it was like that's how everyone did it, and we would do these, you do these BANT call out campaigns, and half the time, as a person who actually at one point was sitting dialing for dollars, like using the phone and calling a lead list day after day after day, and at one point realizing that what was paid for was kind of nonsense, like it's just. It could work, but there's so much shadiness, I'll say, around some of the process with that, that it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and we just haven't seen it effective. So
I'll tell you one of the reasons why I think it wouldn't work. Okay. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. Any client worth having probably has 5 people in their ear right now. So why would they take that meeting? Why would they take that call and be serious about it? So I think it might be attracting, if it is attracting sales, it's probably not attracting high dollar sales, great clients. It's probably grabbing people who don't know where else to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree completely with both of those sentiments, and I think that there is a place for it. I think that it has worked for some organizations in the past, and if it's working, like Tyler said, invest into it. I think that for those organizations that it's worked for, is it strategic? They have a game plan around it. These lead campaigns, they aren't just pulling down a list from Zoom Info or finding them on LinkedIn and then just calling and calling and calling, or those appointment setters, if you will. They're using it strategically in the sense of, hey, we've had Jimmy Smith at 4 of our events, right? Which has been fantastic, right? It's time to add them into our cold calling list of people to call and go, Jimmy, we've seen you at 4 of our events, man. This has been great. We've loved getting to know you. So fill us in. What are you doing, right? What's the topic of today, right? We've seen you at the collaboration event. We've seen you at the networking event. We've seen you at the data center event, right? Are you managing all 3 of those? And really, it goes back to where in the funnel are they, right? And I think that that's a big aspect of it, because right now what I see with those appointment setting and those lead generation campaigns is it's skipping a piece of the funnel, and we're focused on getting them into consideration right away to get them to purchase right away, which doesn't match the buying cycle of 12 to 18 months for a giant tech purchase, if you will, because we're all in the business of making money, right? We all want to make sure that we're out there driving revenue for the business. So we make sure that it attaches to that. And I apologize for my laugh. Somebody just came in with the question, does a mustache or facial hair in general help you become a better marketer and or business leader? And the answer to that is 110%.
Yes.
The answer is no.
Stays.
No, that's where the power lies. It's all in the facial hair. That's where the marketing.
I have a different opinion, though.
That's fair. That's fair. So any other questions, feel free to drop them in. We're going to stay on for another couple minutes, but we want to make sure that we help you with this, right? This is all a bunch of information that we've just thrown out at you about how the market's changed from MDF and budgets and so on. And so really, we'll jump in and we'll help you out, right? We'll help you build that optimal budget assessment, if you will, and that budget that you can take to leadership of why we should be investing, right? This is a session with me diving into the business, right? Going into that cost per acquisition, that customer lifetime value. What are our margins? What are our key trends, right? And what's going to be effective to go drive the business forward. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to email me optimal budget assessment and at sam@4bmarketing.com. And we'll set up an hour and we'll dive into it and help you guys build that game plan to take it to leadership. Any additional final thoughts from Aaron or Tyler while we're waiting for the chat, if anybody else has any questions?
I've got one. Authenticity. I use that word a lot, but I'd like to end with sort of floating that idea out there, because everything we've talked about, even what brought it to mind was the appointment setting question, like thinking about the lack of authenticity that can come through that. When you're skipping the full funnel, you're skipping awareness and you're just going to cold calling or buying a lead list from somebody who you don't know the quality of that list. Even if they tell you that it's a great list, it might not be. There's a lack of authenticity in all of this, even on only relying on MDF and then publishing the same or very similar content to a competitor. There's nothing genuine about that. And I think people respond to authenticity, to genuine messages that relate to who they are, what they need and want, their goals, their jobs. So I think just focusing on thinking about bringing your authentic self to the conversation, whether it's an individual or a company, it's everything to me. It's very important.
Yeah. And Tyler, let me jump in really quick on that, on the authenticity side. I love it. Because I think a lot of times we get in the rumble, right? We get focused on quarter mania. We got to go close deals. And we forget that we're dealing with people, They have jobs, right? They're trying to get a promotion, right? We need to talk to people as people, right? They aren't robots. They aren't sitting behind signing purchase orders just automatically, right? It all comes back to the authenticity and the person that we're talking to, right? That personal value of really your business value, your personal value of what ethics and standards you have need to get through, because you're dealing with people, right? That's who you're dealing with. You aren't dealing with selling $1 million contract just to the poster behind me, right? There's people behind that are signing. And so that's so important. I'm glad you brought that up. Tyler, final thoughts.
4 really magical words. I know a guy. That's that really, really magical words in business. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the relationship of marketing and sales, the expectations do need to adjust a little bit. We're on the same team. We're running in parallel. It's a 3-legged race here, right? We're supporting one another. Nobody's going to hand you a stack of leads. And if they do, those leads are not going to become customers, meaning that we just wasted everybody's time. So I think we just need to change the perspective of what we need to do together, how marketing is intended to pave the road and make it a smooth journey for target audience to known to customer, right? And then into maintaining that relationship. And again, I really encourage you to think about yourself, your business as being in a very competitive space and wanting to dominate that competitive space. Because if you're only thinking about just surviving, well, that's probably what's going to happen. But if you think about thriving and you think about, okay, well, what are these guys doing over here? And are they trying to out resource us? Well, where can we find some advantage? And when are we ready to kind of step in and step up our game to start capturing more of those prospects?
Love it. Love it. And I'll wrap us up here with my final thoughts. So, big piece, MDF is a part of it, and it still will be a part of it. And we need to leverage it to go be successful, right? But it is a piece, right? We need to invest our own piece to go drive our own unique value proposition to the marketplace. And a big piece of what we've talked about today is kind of that net new customer. Don't forget about your existing customers, right? They still need to be a part of this mix, because the only way to grow a business is grow existing customers and go get net new customers. So don't forget about those that are buying from you today and how you can grow those customers, right? Referrals are always a faster way to do things, right? As you mentioned, I know a guy, right? Some of that comes back to investing into those existing relationships and those existing customers, right? And leveraging potentially some of that MDF dollars or your budget to be able to do customer appreciation, right? That's important. Don't forget about that, because those are the 2 big revenue drivers for the business. So I want to thank Tyler and Aaron so much for joining and providing your insight. Really appreciate all of the attendees joining in. Like I said, feel free to email me and we'll help you build that budget plan to go forward. But thank you so much and exploring the MDF opportunities with us here. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to Send This to Your CEO, the B2B Tech Marketing Podcast. Tune in next time for more insights and strategies to stay ahead in B2B tech.